Good day. Today is August 5th, 2020. Still early. It's still morning, 10:30 or so. I woke up this morning at 1:45 after just a couple hours, 2.5 hours sleep, and I digested a dream and got me thinking on different things, and I almost got up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and I was going to make a recording, and I thought, I better sleep on it, because I had said to myself that I wasn't going to make any more videos. But I think I'm going to make an exception with this, because I'm not really bringing new information. I'm giving you a key to things that I've already said in my other videos, and a key that you can use for understanding or communicating via more than just a language, more than just a spoken language, with recordings that you have of other people, or when you watch other videos or TV, or when you are communicating with someone else. And this is an important thing, because recently one of our main forms of communications has been cut severely, drastically, and quite quickly from our use, and that is masks, because of the virus that here's another form of communication, our language. Look how many different usages we have of the word virus. You can have a virus in your computer, and there's a long, deep meaning or understanding of why our word, our form of communication of that particular word, virus, is being used for something that we can have internally in our body or in our computer, which is two different things, although our body communicates and our computers communicate. So one thing that this came out of was just me reviewing my last video that I downloaded on July 20th. And now I have to bring in some other things I've said in some of my other videos about why I bring this video to you, not as a record, as something I'm reading or something I'm taking a drastic amount of notes. It's just kind of off my head, because I said I'm communicating with you right now, in the now, and I'm using my eyes and my face. As some of you may know, there's a science of understanding body language, and that's one reason I'm kind of not giving you a full view of my body, so that you can't see my body, but I'm concentrating on my face, which is a different level of communications. I don't know how many I've lost you there, but this video is really only say out of 100 people that'll watch it, and some of my videos aren't even up to 100 viewers, according to the counter, if that's true or not. Maybe only one person will really understand what I'm talking about, but 10 or 20 people out of those 20, out of those 100 will go, wow, yeah, he's got something there, and that might turn on things in those 20 people, 10 or 20 people, that will make them try to learn more on the subject of communications of our languages. Now, there's whole different levels, and I'm going to use Trump as an example. People are saying that Trump is playing chess with his opponents, and that Trump is using three-dimensional chess, or he's playing four-dimensional chess. There's some truth to that. And I've noticed this with different nationalities. It's more so in Europe and not so much here in the United States of America, or the U.S. entity, partly due to our commingling and being made up of the whole world, more so than a lot of nations, and our English language in America, which is a little bit more degenerated, or a little bit more bastardized, some people call it, and also you got to plug in the different generational forms of communication, such as city I don't even want to call it English, but city talk, street talk, rap talk, as compared to maybe my generation from the Vietnam era, and the X generation and all those generations. Forms of communications is a little bit different. And I'm going to plug in there something that's been on my mind that fits in there too. This is a good example of when Melinda and Bill Gates gave their announcement of the second wave, that this one's going to be noticed much more. So if you review that video, there's so much more being said than what he's saying, if you just wrote down what he had said. And I kind of gained that from one of the people that's on my list of communications on my mail, my emails. He said, I don't hear too well, and could you tell me what Bill Gates is saying? And first I just said quickly what he said, or what we thought he said, and then I thought, well, no, he's saying more than that. And so I put down the ums and the well, you knows, and ahs and yeses, all those things that some people say more than others. And then I put in there the pauses, the ums, and you see all that compared to the quick writing down of what he would say, in, say, a journalistic report. There's different levels there, you understand? And that's what I'm saying with Trump. What people claim, he's on different forms of chess. So that's kind of getting into the psychology of communications. But say, when you go to college, if you're majoring in psychology, you have Psychology 1.0, and which you may get a brief introduction even in high school, taking psychology class maybe, but it's more of a college class. And almost every bachelor's degree, you oftentimes have to have one semester of psychology. But if you're going on into a master's degree in psychology, you're going to get 2.0 and 3.0. And if you get into a doctorate, maybe, of course they call it something else, but it'd be equivalent to a 6.0 in psychology. Well, what I'm talking about right now is something like 12 or 15.0 psychology, in that there's a lot of different levels of communications involved in our languages. And the language, say Greek language, say as an example, the word love, there's something like 5 or 8 different words for the word language. The word love in ancient Greek. So that's telling the wise person that they have a much higher level of understanding, or smarts even, of what is around us, because of just that one example of love. Whereas in the English language, there may be 3 main definitions of love, and generationally, over 2 or 3 or 4 generations, the order of that meaning of the word love, meaning the first definition, second definition, third generation, maybe the second and the first may switch places. That's an interesting thing, is if you look in a dictionary that was published 100 years ago, there's a little bit more example of that. And if you'll notice, the dictionaries from 150 years ago or 100 years ago oftentimes have more definitions. And then something I noticed in a dictionary that a friend of mine bought, I think it was 15 years ago, and it was the Microsoft's dictionary of the English language. And it was interesting using that because it was a real modern, up-to-date form of a dictionary through the eyes of Microsoft, which plays into play even more so today with Google and Bill Gates and a lot of those people censoring our language and taking things out of our language. I'm probably losing some of you. Let's see, it's 14 minutes. I wanted to cover some basic things to try to get out in this video. So it would be telling you something new, and I'm kind of losing that. But then again, maybe I've said enough. I've planted some seeds into your heads. Oh, shucks. Yeah, well. Let's see, what do we got here?
Call from V805126.
Computer robocall. Anyway, so there's a lot of different subtleties that are in what we communicate. There's a lot of different levels. Our facial expressions, our body language. And to prove this, I wanted to bring in one important thing, and that is what happens in a court when you have one side going against another side. And the proof of what I'm saying here is in that really high level court cases that are really important, that have a lot of money behind them. You have actually professional, not even just one person, but an entire company that's hired to help pick the jury. And purposely I'm not going to give an example, but I think first I ever saw this was an interview on 60 Minutes maybe 20 years ago, and they had actually this woman that was an expert on this, that she was being paid to help in the jury selection from one side. And anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that this is an art, it's a science, and it's so far developed in the levels of psychology, maybe up at 20.0 psychology, or at least an 8 or 10.0 psychology, that this woman was able to pick, just by interviewing and doing a profile of the different people on that jury pool or selection pool, what that jurist would be able to be influenced in this case so that they would render a verdict, in favor of the client. And very few of you may be aware of that, and even fewer will realize how true that is. And some of the other of you will be able to realize the truth behind that is just by the mere amount of money that this company or that this lady and her helpers are paid by their client in this process. And they wouldn't be getting all that money if there wasn't anything to it. And so the people that are super good at this, picking the jury pool, really have developed their art, their science, to a level. And again, using that word art, that's a level of communication that's high above many of us. And that's why there's so much put into art, and so many different levels and so many different feelings and classifications of art, because that's a level of communications that is higher than just the written word or the spoken word or the communications form of what I'm doing one-on-one through my eyes, and that we have lost by the masks. So Also, I want to throw in there, getting back to my last video, right at the end, I go, I don't know, just the last 2 or 3 seconds of the video. Well, I'm communicating a lot there more than what I had planned, and just to give you a brief idea, is what I'm doing just the opposite to what I'm shaking. I'm communicating that I'm going, yeah, and I'm making a comment over that whole video, which I think was one of my best videos, and that's why I wasn't going to do any more videos, because I've said enough in that video. If you watch it over 2 or 3 or 4 times, there's so many levels of communication of what I'm saying in that video, and a lot of it, of course, is repeat of or parts of things I've done in my other video, but I think I brought it all together to say even more. So what I'm saying is that, well, say the Native Americans, they were looked down at by the people that came over in the 1700s and the 1800s of being lower, and yet when you communicate, especially with an elder of a native tribe, they actually have a lot less to say than what some of us, or some forms of language or styles of language are. They're communicating actually at a higher level, and many of it is forms of natural expressions. Yeah, it's deep there too. Even humor, there's all kinds of different kinds of humor, and that's forms of communications on levels that slip by a lot of the censors. George Carlin, his humor in the last year or 2 of his life was at a much higher level of communications. It was on a political level, and there's some thoughts that he was done in because he was communicating too much about what was happening to society. So that's a level of communications. Consciousness. I said in a video 4 or 5 videos ago about the comets going by, and even this last comet a week or 2 ago, I felt consciousness coming from that, and maybe this is even part of that. And I actually got to see one evening, a week or 2 ago, I went to a different part of the city where it wasn't as many lights, and I was able to see with a couple other people that had been watching the comet the week before, where it was even more visible, so they were able to point it out. And you couldn't quite see it with your naked eye, but with a pair of binoculars, when you knew, you could see it. So I was able to see that particular comet. So bringing this into the discussion, I discussed part of it briefly with the German fellow on the Vancouver UFO meeting that I'd also posted here on 2 parts. Anyway, he brought in the comet or the star in the sky back 2,000 years ago when Jesus Christ or Yahshua HaMashiach was born in this life, and he was saying about that, and I was saying the significance of the comet at that time. And anyway, he came across like he was attacking me, and really I tried to tell him, well, I agree with you, but his tone and his voice, he was kind of attacking me, and it kind of took away from the overall discussion, but in some ways it didn't. And so what I'm saying is, at important times in a civilization, you'll have a comet or a series of comets like we just recently went through in the last 3 or 4 months. And whether that's a coincidence or what, I'm just pointing out that that's a fact. And like in 1997 at the Phoenix Lights, very few people realized that we had a comet going by at that same time. And so what the Phoenix Lights was a gathering. And I said it was many different forms were coming through Phoenix, even dimensionally, in the 5 dimensions at the same time. There was spirit stuff happening. And you have that even with the whole thing behind Roswell in 1947. You had a point in history or in time where tremendous things were going to be happening. World War II had ended. The CIA was ballooning and kind of taking over things, and there was a transition point there. Just like there was a transition point in 2001 in September. You have convergences, and I'm losing you, but 1% or 0.1% or even 10% of you are getting the drift of what I'm communicating to you. So the key to this whole video is now that you're thinking on that level, or it's open, I've opened the door to you and given you that key, that maybe you will look deeper into how communications go about, and what you can read in somebody's face. And the actual generation before me, I remember my aunts and uncles that were older than my dad, so in some sense they were, it was the older generation. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is the elders were able to see the truth, read the truth in people just by how they communicated. And that's a lost art, unfortunately, because so many people lie today. The whole news media is one big form of lying, and people don't develop their ability to read somebody's face or read somebody as they're communicating one another, or they don't trust it. So they want to believe somebody that's got money, like Bill Gates or George Soros, or the news media, the books, the school system. the institutions, they'll rely on that more than their own being, their ability. So what I'm saying is the older generation than even me was able to live a better life because they had the ability to see the truth in the reality that they were living. So they were living an entire different reality, where the kids today are living a reality according to their computer. And the next generation after that, who become more dependent on the robotics and the vaccinations that they've received, their DNA, their abilities will be more tied into electronics, which is actually a lower form of being. Yeah, and I just remembered, I want to bring back in the word structuring that I've been talking about in my most recent videos. The structuring of matter and the dimensions, and the importance of the fourth dimension being the interaction, the motion of the first three, and that's the doorway to the fifth. Well, it's the same with the matter. You've got air or gas, liquid and solids is the first three, which is kind of like the first three dimensions. And then you've got that higher dimension, the fifth dimension, which is the unseen dimension, the spirit, the higher dimension being the fifth, and the fourth is that connection. Well, you have the same thing in language, and you take a sentence and you break it down, and you have the structuring of that sentence. Well, that's what I'm talking about. The eye, the communications, our body language, that is the structuring of our forms of communications. You get that? And that's why I said that that's the most important science, field of science, kind of like equal to the realization of the wheel. And so by understanding this science, which was always there in the natural form, and what I'm saying is our forefathers, or the generations before me, or some of the races of people that stay with the natural forms or the natural laws, such as the Native Americans and other indigenous people, they're communicating on a higher level than what the kids are today. And that's all deals with the structuring of our communications, of our consciousness. There, I've said a lot. Let's see, that's 33 minutes. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. I mean, this is a whole field of science. Psychology 15.0. Good day.